There are movie stars who, when I watch their films, feel like real giants. They stand tall on the big screen, radiating strength and a powerful presence that keeps viewers glued to the screen. But what few notice is that many of these legends are actually much shorter than they appear in movies. I find this really interesting because it shows that an actor's influence isn't limited by height or size. In the vast world of cinema, it's talent and personality that make them unforgettable to audiences. Please like and subscribe to the channel to join me in discovering these 12 amazing faces. Alan Ladd is one star I've always admired. His sharp eyes and tightly pressed lips made him one of Hollywood's toughest and most captivating men in films like This Gun for Hire and Shane. But what few know is that despite his strong build, Alan was only about 5 feet 9 inches tall, some say even shorter. Paramount Pictures had to come up with many tricks to make him appear taller on screen. One famous secret was his frequent pairing with Veronica Lake, who was just 4 feet 6 inches tall. This made Alan look taller without complicated special effects. They worked together in 7 movies, and it wasn't just chemistry, it was smart height management. In Shane, director George Stevens even dug trenches for taller co-stars like Jack Palance to stand in, so they'd be level with Alan. This became a filmmaking tradition. Alan also stood on hidden platforms or lad boxes to boost his height. Low camera angles were often used to make him look more imposing. His wardrobe was custom-made too, with vertical striped suits and high-waisted pants to create a taller appearance. His shoes added 2 to 3 inches to his height. I find it fascinating that Alan's modest height may have shaped his unique acting style. He used minimal movements and conveyed emotion mostly through his eyes, avoiding big gestures that might break the carefully crafted height illusion. Director Gene Nicolesco once said Alan made up for what he lacked in inches with sheer intensity. The camera didn't see his height, only the sharpness and depth in his eyes. James Cagney stands as an unforgettable icon of Hollywood's golden age. With his strong build and piercing eyes, he embodied tough, captivating men in classic films like The Public Enemy and White Heat. Yet, in reality, Cagney was only about 5 feet 5 inches tall, a surprising fact given his commanding presence on screen. Unlike many actors with modest height, Cagney never let it affect his acting style or confidence. He famously said, "I don't care if I'm tall or short, I only care about how I act." Warner Brothers employed subtle techniques to make him appear taller on film. Casting supporting actors of similar or shorter height was a common strategy to maintain visual balance. In scenes requiring taller co-stars, staging tricks such as having Cagney sit or stand on stairs were used to harmonize height differences. The low camera angle, known as the Cagney angle, was frequently applied to make him look sturdier and taller without seeming unnatural. Director Michael Curtis skillfully used this angle to focus on Cagney's energy and emotional intensity rather than his real height. His dynamic, intense acting style and quick movements drew attention away from height disparities. Film historian David Thompson once said, "Cagney moves like a coiled spring, his energy makes him look much bigger than his actual height." Warner Brothers once promoted him as 5 feet 9 inches tall, about 4 inches taller than reality. Cagney noted that people often expected him to be taller, which could be seen as a compliment to his acting talent and the filmmaker's craft. It was his energy and unique personality that turned James Cagney into a legend beyond any measurement of height. Edward G. Robinson was one of the most haunting figures on the big screen, known for terrifying roles like Rico in Little Caesar and the relentless detective in Double Indemnity. On screen, his commanding presence shocked audiences when they learned he was only about 5 feet 5 inches tall in real life. The trick to making Robinson appear larger than life wasn't just camera tricks, but a complete psychological portrayal of physical threat through acting and framing. Directors like Vin Loy and Fritz Lang didn't just make him look taller, they focused on establishing psychological dominance. For example, as a gangster, Robinson would often sit behind a desk while others stood across from him, creating a powerful authority that went beyond height. In confrontational scenes, he invaded the personal space of taller actors, creating discomfort and tension that translated into a chilling menace on screen. Robinson's modest height was compensated by his distinctive voice, short, strong, and slightly nasal, which commanded auditory dominance, forcing attention wherever he went. Director John Huston once said Robinson didn't need to be tall, his voice made him seem 3 meters tall. Warner Brothers carefully concealed Robinson's true height, limiting press encounters and arranging interviews at seated events to avoid revealing his stature. Official studio biographies listed him as 5 feet 9 inches tall, well above reality. Interestingly, Robinson's smaller stature actually added psychological complexity to his gangster roles. As critic Roger Ebert noted, Robinson had to fight harder to survive in a world full of larger men, which added depth and unique appeal to his performances. This is the story of a man small in stature but mighty in presence and spirit, a true legend of cinema. Mickey Rooney was one of Hollywood's youngest and shortest stars, standing only about 5 feet tall. Despite his small stature, he became MGM's biggest box office draw in the late 1930s and early 1940s, famous for the Andy Hardy series and major musicals alongside Judy Garland. Unlike many shorter actors who tried to appear taller, Mickey was promoted by MGM as a youthful star, with his small build perfectly suited for teenage roles well into his 20s. The Andy Hardy films turned his modest height into an advantage early in his career. The real challenge came as he matured and sought more adult roles. At that point, MGM employed various techniques like custom shoes adding 3 inches in height and special camera angles to help him look taller. Directors often placed Mickey on platforms or had taller co-stars sit during scenes together to reduce height differences. Cinematographer Harold Rawson developed special lighting tricks to extend Rooney's shadow on walls, creating an illusion of greater height. Costume designers avoided horizontal patterns, instead using vertical stripes to elongate his frame. Interestingly, later in his career, his short stature became a comedic asset, especially when paired with much taller actresses. This self-aware approach showed remarkable adaptability, helping him sustain a remarkable 80-plus-year career in entertainment. He once said, "I'm not a tall man, but I stand among giants in this business." Director Clarence Brown noted that despite standing around 5 feet 3 inches, Mickey's talent and screen presence surpassed many actors twice his height. The camera doesn't measure height, it measures presence, and that presence helped Rooney break barriers to become one of Hollywood's longest-lasting legends. Humphrey Bogart brought to life the image of a mysterious, tough, and captivating man, becoming an iconic figure in classic cinema. Yet behind the spotlight, his actual height was much less than audiences might imagine. Warner Brothers listed him at around 5 feet 10 inches, but in reality, he was closer to 5 feet 7 inches, with some sources suggesting even shorter. What made Bogart's case unique was not hiding his height but relying on his career and filmmaking techniques to make him appear stronger on screen. Early on, while playing supporting roles, the studio paid little attention to his actual height. But once he became the lead in famous films like High Sierra and The Maltese Falcon, special techniques were applied to boost his perceived height. The Bogart box, a movable platform, was often used when acting with taller co-stars such as Ingrid Bergman in Casablanca to minimize height differences. Director Michael Curtis cleverly arranged shots so Bogart stood on steps or Bergman sat, hiding any obvious height gaps. Cinematographer Arthur Edison used lighting and camera angles designed to elongate Bogart's shadow and presence subtly. His costumes were also carefully tailored with vertical stripes and high waistlines to visually lengthen his frame. Bogart focused on building a signature image with his characteristic slouch and tilted head, helping mask height differences when next to taller actors. His restrained acting style minimized unnecessary movement, emphasizing facial expression and voice to convey emotion, creating a convincing illusion of height. Warner Brothers managed his public image meticulously, staging official photos and controlling appearances to keep his true height discreet. Director John Huston once said Bogart's physical size didn't define his screen magnetism, it was his commanding presence that mattered. When Bogart entered a room on screen, the audience felt his energy before seeing him. That presence can't be measured by inches. He simply lived and worked with full confidence and personality. Dustin Hoffman came onto the scene a bit later than the classic Hollywood legends, but he created an interesting bridge between traditional techniques and a more modern approach to height illusion on screen. Standing around 5 feet 6 inches, Hoffman didn't try to hide his stature. Instead, he cleverly incorporated it into his characters, making it an important and sometimes defining element. In his breakthrough role in The Graduate, director Mike Nichols used familiar methods like platforms and special camera angles to highlight Hoffman's stature. At the same time, the height difference between Hoffman and Anne Bancroft was used thoughtfully, symbolizing the complex power dynamics in the story. This was the first time a smaller height was transformed into a subtle storytelling tool. In films like Midnight Cowboy and Kramer vs. Kramer, Hoffman's small stature helped portray vulnerability and determined struggle. Rather than seeing height as something to hide, he and his directors made it a distinctive feature, an inseparable part of his identity. Filming techniques evolved to be more subtle compared to obvious low-angle shots used in the past. Elevator shoes and carefully designed wardrobes with vertical lines helped Hoffman enhance his appearance. In Tootsie, his height became an asset when playing a female character, making the role more authentic and relatable. Unlike previous eras, promotional materials avoided exaggerating his height and often simply didn't mention it. Hoffman himself was candid about his height, saying it forced him to develop other qualities and carve out his own unique path in acting. This perspective opened a new way forward for shorter actors, focusing more on talent and personality than on height. Director Sidney Pollack once remarked that Dustin Hoffman didn't try to change his appearance but captivated audiences through his charm and skill, making his height irrelevant. Danny Kaye was a comedy genius known for his extraordinary physical humor and remarkable musical talent. In films like The Secret Life of Walter Mitty and The Court Jester, his energetic performances created a powerful presence on screen, making his height of about 5 feet 8 inches barely noticeable. His constant motion, quick gestures, and dance moves distracted audiences from comparing his stature to that of taller co-stars. In scenes requiring a more traditional leading man presence, classic techniques such as platforms and special camera angles were used to minimize height differences. Interestingly, his compact body was perfectly suited for complex comedic and dance routines that taller, less flexible actors struggled with. Costume designer Edith Head skillfully chose outfits with vertical details and precise tailoring to emphasize his slim figure. Unlike many actors who were sensitive about their height, Kaye embraced it with humor. While filming White Christmas alongside Bing Crosby, who stood 6 feet 4 inches tall, Kaye joked that their average height was perfect. Bing had too much, and he had too little. This light-hearted approach extended to using height differences for comedic effect, adding charm and uniqueness to his roles. Director Norman Z. MacLeod once said that Danny's energy made people forget his actual size, that he became larger than life through his talent, and that was the extraordinary gift he brought to the screen. George Raft became famous for his cold, intimidating gangster roles in Hollywood during the 1930s and 1940s. Although only about 5 feet 7 inches tall, his presence on screen appeared much larger. His minimalist acting style, standing still with subtle facial changes, not only conveyed strong emotions but also helped maintain the illusion of height. Warner Brothers used many traditional techniques to highlight Raft's figure, from low-angle shots to vertical striped suits and high-waisted pants, plus shoes with about 2 inches of lift to make him appear taller. Strategic casting was crucial, pairing him with shorter actresses and carefully chosen supporting actors to avoid obvious height comparisons. When necessary, Raft stood on platforms or higher ground on set to balance height with co-stars. His compact but muscular build projected a swirling, latent violence, making him more intimidating than larger men who relied solely on size. Film historian Eddie Muller noted that Raft's stillness and blank stare were what truly made him frightening. Warner Brothers' publicity department often exaggerated his height, listing him as 5 feet 9 inches or even 5 feet 11 inches. Special photo techniques with angles and perspective were used to extend his height visually. Raft accepted his stature calmly and practically, just as he portrayed his characters. Director Raoul Walsh said George knew exactly who he was and didn't waste time worrying about things he couldn't change. He focused on making the most of his strengths. Critic Andrew Sarris emphasized that Raft's gangster roles didn't need a giant frame but demanded absolute confidence and unwavering belief in winning against all odds, and that was their real power. Sal Mineo was a rebellious young man with subtle acting skills and a way of showing the vulnerability of youth. He became one of the most captivating supporting actors of the 1950s, especially known for his Oscar-nominated role alongside James Dean in Rebel Without a Cause. What few people realized was that Sal stood only about 5 feet 9 inches tall, a height that required careful management on screen, especially as he grew older in his roles. Early on, his small stature was an advantage, perfectly conveying the immaturity and fragility of the teenage characters he played. Director Nicholas Ray skillfully used the height difference between Sal and James Dean to highlight the youth and protective needs of their characters. But as Sal pursued more mature roles, his height became a significant challenge. Studios employed traditional techniques like platform shoes, low camera angles, and strategic staging to minimize direct height comparisons with taller co-stars. His wardrobe was designed to emphasize his slim but balanced figure, with vertical details and precise tailoring to elongate his frame. His signature pompadour hairstyle also added a few inches, a trick many shorter actors have used throughout Hollywood history. Unlike some stars who try to hide their height, Sal sometimes let it serve the character's purpose, especially when vulnerability or youthful appearance mattered. This selective approach showed a more nuanced way of managing height rather than simply hiding it. However, his small stature made it harder to transition into traditional leading roles as he matured, which likely contributed to challenges later in his career. Director Don Siegel once noted that Sal had a natural talent far beyond his smaller physical stature compared to taller actors. Yet Hollywood often failed to see that, focusing more on height than on real ability. Sal's story reminds us how many potential stars were passed over simply because they didn't fit the usual height standards. Sammy Davis Jr. was an extraordinary talent. He sang, danced, acted, and performed comedy with captivating energy. Many were surprised to learn he stood just 5 feet 9 inches tall, making him one of the shortest leading men in Hollywood history. But that modest height helped shape his resilience and determination to overcome every challenge in his career. As a black artist, Sammy faced both racial discrimination and physical barriers. He developed incredible agility and perfect technique to rise above them all. On stage, height was never an issue. His dynamic dance moves and powerful voice drew the audience's full attention. In films, he wore lifts adding 2 to 3 inches and styled his signature tall pompadour to create a taller appearance. Directors used low camera angles and careful staging to minimize height differences with taller co-stars. Sammy often stood on platforms or higher ground to balance the frame. In the Rat Pack, alongside tall stars like Dean Martin and Frank Sinatra, they cleverly used choreography and staging to reduce direct height comparisons. Sammy also embraced humor to playfully downplay his stature, showing absolute confidence. Once, when Dean Martin joked about his height, Sammy shot back, "You may look down on me physically, but musically, I'm the one leading." That said a lot about his spirit and will. Sammy once said, "As a short black man, I had to be 10 times better just to be half recognized." And he did exactly that. Frank Sinatra said, "Sammy may have been small in size, but he was a giant in talent. When he performed, you forgot everything except the magic happening on stage." Burgess Meredith was an incredibly versatile actor, with a deep acting ability that made him one of Hollywood's most respected villains. I think of his iconic role as Mickey in the Rocky series, and the unforgettable Penguin in Batman, characters made bigger than life, yet Meredith stood just about 5 feet 5 inches tall. That small stature demanded careful control on screen, especially when playing powerful characters. But you know what? He didn't need to be tall to show strength. In roles like the boxing coach Mickey, directors actually used his smaller frame to highlight the character's vulnerability. When stronger physical presence was required, Meredith wore lifts, stood on platforms, and the camera angles were low to create the illusion of height. What impressed me most was his voice, resonant, precise, and powerful. That voice could fill a room and make his small frame seem to vanish. The famous director John Huston once said Meredith didn't need height to grab attention, because his voice and his economical yet precise movements created a unique power. He knew how to use every gesture with purpose, achieving maximum effect without excessive motion. This restraint made his acting style refined and powerful beyond any physical limits. Meredith rarely talked about his height, he focused on skill and convincing the audience. He said, "If I can make you believe I am a military commander or a boxing champion, then my actual height no longer matters." This mindset helped him build a respected and lasting career in Hollywood. Critic Pauline Kael was right when she said, "Despite being small, Meredith never gave an ordinary performance. Even in the quietest moments, he dominated the screen with technical mastery and absolute intelligence." Frank Sinatra was a legend, known for his powerful voice and magnetic presence on screen. I always thought of him as a symbol of the 20th century, but few realize he was only about 5 feet 7 inches tall, maybe even a bit shorter. That height meant he had to be careful with his film roles. What's interesting is that his fame as a singer created a public image before many actually met him in person. His strong voice made people assume he had an impressive stature. When he started serious acting, especially after winning an Oscar for From Here to Eternity, studios used many tricks to make him look taller on screen. He often wore custom-made elevator shoes that added 2 to 3 inches. Directors used low camera angles to enhance his presence. When acting alongside tall actresses like Doris Day or Deborah Kerr, Sinatra was positioned to stand taller or the actresses sat or stood lower. For male co-stars taller than him, similar techniques were applied to minimize height differences. But beyond all that, it was Sinatra's powerful personality and legendary status that truly made him shine regardless of height. His connections with powerful figures, including organized crime, added a dangerous and authoritative aura far beyond physical stature. Director Gordon Douglas once said Frank carried himself as the most important person in any room, and everyone believed it because he believed it himself. Sinatra was comfortable with his height, never sensitive to comparisons or jokes. That confidence extended to his relationships with taller women, Like his wife Mia Farrow, who was noticeably taller in public appearances. Instead of feeling diminished, Sinatra embraced that contrast to show self-assurance. By the 1960s, filming became more natural, but his fame was so strong audiences accepted his screen presence no matter what. Director Sidney J. Furie recalled, Frank had something far more important than height. He had presence. When he walked onto set, everyone felt it. Many Hollywood beauty standards are just made-up rules, not absolute truths. The 12 stars we talked about broke every height limit to build brilliant careers, proving that talent and presence on screen are what truly make legends. Which one surprised you the most? Have you ever noticed height tricks in your favorite classic movies? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We're eager to hear your stories and views about these screen legends.